Hello, beautifuls. You're listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Vanessa Scotto, and I'll be joined soon by my dear friend and co-host, Brooke Thomas. On the show, we're talking about being students on the embodied spiritual path. And what does that actually mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything, all the beauty and crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life? We'll be attempting to sort that out for ourselves here on the show, and we're always so glad you're listening in. In today's episode, we're talking about the holidays and emotional contagion. As we recorded this episode, I kept having that song, There's No Place Like Home for the Holidays, stuck in my head, and kind of ironically, because that's not the case for everyone. Even when you love your family and you love your friends and you're looking forward to it, a lot can arise during this time of year. So in this episode, we're talking about how can you find sanity amidst the people who are most likely to push your buttons? What are the best ways to navigate your friends, family, and loved ones? And how can your own expectations and belief systems be creating havoc when all you want is joy and peace? That and much more will unfold soon. If you're enjoying the show, we'd be totally delighted if you left a review on iTunes or on our Facebook page, which is Bliss and Grit. You can also head over to blissandgrit.com and subscribe to hear updates on any upcoming events we may be having. One last note before we head into the conversation, Brooke and I have potty mouths, as you probably know if you've been listening. So if there are kids around, go ahead and pop in some headphones. Okay, here we go. So holiday season is in full effect, I think, Brooke. And clients of mine have already begun talking about how they're going to interact with and handle their families over the holidays. You know, I guess because Thanksgiving already happened, and in the United States, a lot of people are with their families during that time. And now we're moving into Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's, and a lot of people around the world will start to be with their families. And what's funny is we always think in our like imaginary lands, like holidays seem like such a dear time, right? Like so precious, and we're going to be around our loved ones and decorate. And yet for so many people, being around their family is a really huge source of stress. And they'll start to predict it like 3 weeks before, and they'll need like a detox 3 weeks after. So it got me thinking about, I don't know if you ever heard that Ram Dass quote, but Ram Dass said so beautifully, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
I love that one.
It's just so fucking genius.
Yep.
I mean, nobody knows. I guess I was going to say nobody knows how to push your buttons like your family, but then again, it's really probably more like nobody else is able to allow you to want to push your own buttons than your family.
Right. You were all crafting in the button factory together.
Exactly. So I thought we could talk a little bit about family dynamics, holidays, and emotional contagion from all those psychological and spiritual angles we just love so much.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, we have certain layers of intimacy, and these are the inner circle people, you know, who we were born to and are related to, like siblings, you know, also born to your parents and everything. And so there's just this way, you know, where you share a more close to the bone kind of intricate psychological weaving that you've all gone through together, and you identify with them differently than you would friends, even your closest friends, or than you would, you know, this comes up in marriages and partnerships a lot too. But that's still a person you chose at some point in your adult life. And you're navigating that by choice, you know, as adults. So yeah, our families have this special way of not just getting us worked up, bringing out those parts of ourselves that we might like to pretend we don't have anymore. But also really getting us to notice just how much we want to steer their ship, and that we believe we're the ones who maybe are more enlightened and we've got it figured out. And if only they could be more like blah, or if only they could understand more deeply, whatever, this thing that I understand. So really so much of the pain comes from trying to hold on to the reins when really the reins aren't ours.
All right, well, that is the much broader overarching issue, I think, probably in life, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to control things and manage them seems to be a huge part of our dilemma. Like we don't have a problem. We just think we have a problem, and our management of it seems to be the most problematic element. But I'm thinking as you were talking about, I was talking to a client the other day, and we were talking about how she gets tired around people. Like she didn't want to be around people, and, that kind of HSP conundrum we talked about in the spiritually sensitive episode. And I don't know if I shared this at the time, but I'm finally starting to kind of put the pieces together on this in a more clear way. I realized that in psychology, the way that we get wounded is in relationship to people, period, right? Like we're born kind of pure. We have these wonderful potentialities. Perhaps we have some karma. That's a whole other discussion. But we're born with potentiality, kind of happy beings, wired for joy. And then life comes along, most often in the form of people. We could have traumatic accidents as well. But most of our wounding and our pain bodies are created in relationship to others. So now I started to realize for myself that I think in my mind, I often thought of myself as an introvert because I don't always like to be around people. Very few people do I like to be around. I will often complain about people and like having to be around them, and I want a lot of time alone. And then I came to realize, actually, I don't think I'm an introvert because I do best when I travel in like big, fun groups with common purposes, like retreats or like I went to China to study Chinese medicine. It was the best time of my life being with like a committed group of people in a similar, path, on a similar path. What I am is someone who has relationship issues. And when I'm around people, my landmines start getting triggered as they, just walk through the fields and unwittingly set them off. Then things like the fact that I may not have great boundaries. I don't know how to stop talking about something I may not want to talk about anymore. Things like the energetics, like I'm quite quick to think I want you to feel better and absorb as much of your suffering as I can into my system so that I'll deal with it. All of these different intimacy issues and relational issues that I developed make it hard to be around people. So I'd rather just be alone. But it's not because that's what I want. I'm not a hermit. Some people are. It's not me. So I think like when we start to think about the holidays, we can think about that first very basic level. It's a time when you're supposed to be around people. You may want to be around people, or you may not, but you may recognize that whenever you are, it takes something from you. It's draining. It's too much. You get triggered, you get depressed, you get anxious, but you think you're supposed to want it and you kind of do want it, but you shouldn't. And so I think just starting there is where we can start to pre-anticipate the holidays or need 3 weeks post-holiday just to recover.
Right. Totally. Yeah. So for me, well, first of all, that great quote, I think it's Jean-Paul Sartre, but I'm not sure. Hell is other people. So great. And I was thinking too about when we were with Judith Blackstone training in the realization process, and we were talking about being able to feel, I don't know that she would use the term energetic systems, but essentially that was what we were talking about. And you said that it's much easier for you to feel trees. Like, is it easier with trees? And Judith said, no, actually, people are much denser, like human beings have much denser energy bodies than trees. It's just that, they're people in like her perfect kind of Brooklyn affect way. It was so great. It was so funny.
Like, stupid people. Trees are so
Trees
nice.
are just trees. Like, they're not going to trigger you. They're not going to bother you.
They're so much better than pets even. They don't need anything. They have great boundaries.
They're on it. So
self-reliant.
You and the trees. I totally get it. So I guess the first line of defense is the wrong word, but the first line of awareness is awareness. Like, are there certain people who you know are going to be, or who have historically been challenging? Because we don't want to set this up in a way where we're pre-creating problematic engagements. You know, like my mother always makes me crazy over the holidays. Like, let's say you have a parent or a family member, a sibling. I hear this a lot from my clients too, particularly like the sibling they see once every 2 years on purpose, and it's only for some holiday gathering. And it's just like they know it's going to be fireworks. So even in the lead up, it's not that we want to silver lining it or decide, no, it's going to be great. Like, I'm just going to go in there, because it's all about what's really happening for you. So if you go in there with a big smile and I'm really going to ask them about that new job. This year, I'm really going to be understanding. This year, I'm really going to be engaged. They'll feel if underneath it all, you're like, oh my God, I know this is going to be a fucking shit show at some point. So awareness helps a lot. As a precursor, awareness without jumping to an unfortunate conclusion already. And then it comes down to slowing down time, so none of these things are happening yet. And then when you get there, you have to kind of take things in a moment by moment way. And so what that feels like for me, it feels a lot the way that I feel when I meditate, which is I'm in my body. I'm feeling more spacious, which is one of those words that we want to do a whole episode on. So for anyone who's listening, who's like, blah, blah, what does that mean? Like, if it doesn't make sense, chuck it. But it basically has that feeling that it's not so compressed right up against what assumptions you've made in advance about this person. And you can almost regard them with a little bit of a distance. So I'm not trying to advocate like taking on a creepy serial killer vibe with your family and watching them like they're characters on TV. But I'm also not advocating that. Like, chuck the creepy part of it. And like, if you need a little time out, just see, can I really see them? Like, I do this with my mother because she and I have, like, we see each other a lot. And in many ways, we have a very close relationship. But we also have a complicated relationship, like many mothers and daughters. And if I'm having one of those moments where I'm telling myself all kinds of stories about what I wish she believed, or what I wish she could say or do, or why can't she just, chill out, or why can't she just see the other side of the story, or blah, blah, blah. If I just take this moment and I'll even just use the cue, like, just look at her, just look at her. And I don't mean look in that kind of hard look into her eyes, zone in, focus in. It's more like I try and see her and I see all the space around her. And I also feel myself in my own body. So this comes from Judith Blackstone, the realization process. Can you regard that person from within your own body? And suddenly it just, I don't know, it has this magic quality for me. If I'm starting to race towards getting agitated with her, where it's like, I see her as the human being in that particular moment, and not the whole ball of twine that our relationship has been, or that I anticipate it will be. And it's just my mom talking. And I don't know, it just brings this whole softness into the interaction. Does that make sense of you?
Yeah. For those of you who are somatically inclined, what was really interesting about watching Judith work was she would talk about how your past can get stored in your eyes, like literally in the tissue of your eyes, that it can become like a filter. And you could see it like clear as day when people were fogged by their past.
Yeah.
And then she would have them do an exercise where they kind of released the past from their eyes. And I mean, right, Brooke?
Totally
it was like
mind-blowing. Really
like, whoa.
Radical. Yeah.
And then all
radical.
of a sudden you can see not through the eyes of the 7-year-old who was really hurt by this person, but through the eyes of a 43-year-old woman who's, lived, loved, lost and has a much richer relationship to life. So it almost sounds like, in a way, you are clearing the past from your eyes as you soften your gaze and you become present, right? I mean, ultimately what you're describing is becoming very present in the way that you see her. Kieran also recommends something that I have not tried. I haven't needed it yet, and I haven't been able to quite get there. But she said specifically, look at the person's ears while they're talking.
Ears?
She said, look at their ear. Don't look in their eyes. She said she's tried everywhere on a person's face and only the ear works to not absorb them while you're still in a codependent phase. And we should talk about that. But so while you're still kind of corded with this person in this codependent way, look at their ears, sit and hold space, but actually don't listen to their words. She said they will feel very heard and you will not have to be triggered. So there's a couple of tools you all can put in your pocket. We can maybe bookmark those again at the end. But you said a couple of things I wanted to kind of flesh out a little bit to go a little deeper into the conversation. So a few years back, I wrote an article on emotional contagion. And we might have mentioned it in the spiritually sensitive episode. I'm not sure, but we can talk a lot about energy, and all of us can imagine that we feel vibes. I mean, I've never asked a person who didn't feel vibes. So I think we can all say we feel vibes. And in a way that's picking up on energy, a lot of people will acknowledge that maybe they came somewhere in a good mood and they met a friend or a family member who was super anxious or super angry, and they left in a like a disturbed mood, or you went and spent time with someone and you ended up exhausted after. Well, we can look at that from the energetic level, but in the world of psychology, they just call it emotional contagion. In other words, emotions are contagious, right? Doesn't take a lot. In fact, they have found smoking is contagious. Eating habits are contagious. Thinking is contagious. I mean, duh, we're wired together, right? We're interconnected. So, all right. So emotions are contagious. Now with your family, it goes up, turn that dial up by probably 100. So they did this other research study where they were in Spain, and there's a special event in Spain where people walk across hot coals. So there were people walking across hot coals, and then they had family members, watching and cheering them on, and they hooked people up to EKGs. And so they hooked the people watching up and they hooked the people doing it up. And what they noticed was the people watching, when their family member was crossing the hot coals, their EKGs synced. Their heart rates sink. That's how wired we are with our families.
Wow.
There's another little bit of data. I don't know if you know this one, Brooke, but they did some experiments with cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone that we have in our blood, where they measured a child's cortisol levels separate. They measured an adult's cortisol levels separate. They put them into the same room. They measured their blood cortisol levels again. And what happened was the parents went down and the child's went up. We are a homeostatic system.
Yeah.
And we're designed like that. So there was this like psychological research on emotional contagion. I don't know if this is true. And I wish I could remember where I get my research from. This I may have cited somewhere, but they said you have about 2 hours with your family. Like if you're really well practiced, you have about 2 hours where you're like clear thinking and you're Brooke Thomas and you're Vanessa Scotto and I'm 43 and I love meditation. And then all of a sudden after 2 hours, you start to get nappy. Yeah. And then your belief systems, your old thoughts and thinking patterns that would show up in your family start to get stirred. And it's only a matter of time before you can feel the pull to go back to these old patterns. So that's kind of crazy.
It
right?
is crazy, but I think we've also all lived it. Like I listening to you, I'm like, yep, 2 hours, yep, nappy, yep. Then I start going down. Yes, yeah.
There are people, like there is a defense mechanism in psychology. We often talk about repression or, all of these things, sublimation. Well, there is a defense mechanism that is sleeping.
Oh, yeah.
And my sister's classic for that one. Like, that's not my defense.
It's one of my favorites. I'm super into that. Oh, yeah.
Oh, every holiday, my sister takes a nap, full-fledged in front of everybody, falls asleep, like on the couch. So,
yeah, I nap the hell out of napping through the holidays. It's good stuff.
So the first thing is obviously compassion, compassion, compassion. We all go there, and we're wired to go there. So that's part of it. But I was thinking about, I used the analogy of landmines before, and I don't know, this is how it works in my mind. Pain body is probably our more psycho-spiritual way of saying it. But these people planted the landmines in us.
Yes.
Many of them.
Yep.
At least. I mean, through their behaviors, through their belief systems, and then also through our intergenerational trauma and our DNA and our neurobiological wiring. So these people planted the landmines, but like 20 years later, they don't remember where they planted them. They don't know they're there, right? You know, they're not trying to always set them off. Some assholes are.
I was going to say, are you sure? No, but only the assholes. Assholes are a smaller percentage. Yes.
They are. And we should talk about them before we hang up. But most people, most of your lovers, your friends, your family members, they are not trying to set off your pain body landmine. They don't know where it is. They're strolling through the woods of relationship with you. And then they set it off. And as you and I know full well, that what happens with the pain body is it has a life of its own.
Yeah.
So once exploded, remember, I think we've said it before, but the pain body stores neurobiologically with a thought or many thoughts, like a thought stream, with feelings and emotions, and with sensations and behaviors, right? So it has its own thoughts, its own emotions, and its own embodied physical reality, behaviors and sensations. So once that pain body is tripped, you're living from the pain body, unless you're very practiced, which is obviously what we're all hoping for ourselves. And so until you get that traction with yourself, the pain body is blown up, you're in those thoughts, you're in those feelings, and now all of a sudden you're not the person you recognized or liked so much.
Yeah.
Just like 2 weeks ago.
And you can even be inside yourself while it's happening, while the pain body has taken over, going, why am I doing this? Why am I this person? I promised myself I wasn't going to be this person this year. And,
right.
You know, pain body, just for point of reference, this is Eckhart Tolle's term. And he does an exquisite job of describing it in both of his books, The Power of Now and A New Earth. I've been listening to A New Earth lately, the audio, so it's fresh in my mind. And he really talks about it very directly as like this energetic parasite that lives in you and like feeds on the host body. It's really interesting the way he describes it. I know it's so gross. Vanessa's making an oogie face at me on Skype. And
because it is,
but it does. It takes
like that.
It does like take over you. And I think we've all had that. Like, all you have to do is watch the news or think about the fact that road rage is something that exists in our society to know that people get overtaken by their pain bodies and do crazy shit that they wouldn't have done like maybe 3 hours earlier when they were at the office, like eating birthday cake with their friend before they went home for the day to celebrate their birthday. Like, we all have these funny little energetic parasites that live in us, and you just like hook that tripwire and suddenly it's alive in you. So knowing that that's a thing and that it's going to become active, because that's just a part of the human journey.
Unless it's healed and released.
Unless it's healed and released. But we have a bunch of them. And yeah, it's a process of elimination. It's a process of not giving the parasite food. So I guess that's what I would like to talk about is like, how do you recognize when a pain body has taken over you? And how do you stop feeding it? Because when you stop feeding it, it does die eventually, but at least it goes away when you don't give it the food source. And it's honestly like, especially in the beginning stages of starting to work with this, it gets easier, but in the beginning, it's very hard. You know, because it's telling you all of this stuff, like of how important it is and how right it is and how it's the thing to pay attention to. And it feels like your life depends on feeding it.
gosh, I think my mind is actually being blown as we're talking. So if I get a little loopy, forgive me. It's like, what's happening?
That's what these combos are for. It's all good.
Okay. I think how do you stop feeding it is a good question. I was listening to, I think his name is Jim Tolles. It was a Buddha at the gas pump conversation. But he was basically saying that he was talking about sensitive people and absorbing energy. And I mean, he thinks most of us are sensitive, but you just become aware that you're absorbing energy. And his experience was that you reach a point where you're clear enough, you don't have these pain bodies, that you really don't do that anymore. That, I mean, it's all energy, and energy just moves. This is what one of my energy workers used to say to me back in the day, energy just moves. It can't stick in you unless there's something for it to stick to. Right.
But we've all got a lot of Velcro in there. So,
right. So in other words, it's good to have this larger vision of, it doesn't have to be like that. Like energy just moves. Because I think sometimes when people are sensitive, we're like, well, it's their fault. I was just around this crappy person and then I got in a crappy mood.
Yeah.
And you don't realize, like, no, this is information for you about where you're stuck, like where there's Velcro. It's all like food for evolution for you. So Judith would say the same thing, like, you're spiritually sensitive. Yes. But once you're embodied, no. Like you don't absorb people's energy. Right. Right. And that's probably when you're more free around family members. And so the first thing is, it is possible. It is utterly possible that if you have difficult relationships right now with friends, family members, loved ones, partners, that you can dissolve that you can be non-reactive around them. So let's lay out possibility. And then maybe we could talk about how we can start to work with that. Because I think you and I have, and we have some stuff to share. I thought maybe then we can talk about what are some of the common Velcros.
Yeah,
like,
good idea.
What are some of the common sticky places? So I mentioned the word codependency before, which is actually not my favorite word. I hate that word for some reason.
You do. And it is not a good word because it implies that, being interdependent is a good thing. And it's also inevitable. But codependent, if it had a different name, what it describes is, I think, critically important.
I know. Maybe I hate it because I have it. I can't really say for sure. I just don't like the word. I think, going to school for psychology, they may have overused it. But it's a good word to use because we all are aware of it. So if you were talking to an energy worker or a shaman, they may say that you are corded very strongly with this person. If you were talking to a psychologist, they would say you are codependent with this person. I like corded in a way, I think, better because I think it describes my experience more. Codependence in my mind brings up like actions and choices. And there is that, yes. But it's not just that I can be free to choose how to act with my family members. When you are corded to someone, when you are energetically entangled with them on a fundamental level, there is a lot less experience of choice. That's why I like corded. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I've done energy work where I can see big, thick cords, like going to my parents. I mean, I'm quite enmeshed with my parents in that way, less and less and less and less. But Lord, this has been 43 years of like trying to, chip away at it. So a couple of things about that. When we have these cords, when we are in a codependent relationship, maybe one part that it means is we think that their happiness depends on us and our happiness depends on them. Mm-hmm. That statement alone is huge because it means we feel responsible for their well-being, which means when they are not well or happy or calm or healthy, we start to feel guilty or panicked or like a heavy burden on our shoulders. We feel obligated to do something about it. And since in reality, we actually have nothing to do with their state of mind, it's like a no-win battle, and that is exhausting. So that's one half of that coin. The other side is feeling like they are responsible for making us happy, and that unless they are happy and doing the right things, we cannot be. And I see that also. It's like, if they don't validate me, I can't feel validated. If they don't change the way that they act, I can never feel good because I don't have the family member I want, or the love I want, or the mirroring I needed. Or so in this way, our very happiness and well-being can feel wired to their behaviors and their choices, which is terrible, because if you're not happy about your family, it means they were unskillful in their choices and in their thoughts and in their feelings, right? So I think at that very basic part of codependence, it's part of why we get triggered so much, because you go in there, you want them to say a certain thing they're not saying, or to be in a certain mood they're not, or to not say what they would say, or choose what they would choose, because it all feels like either I can't be happy or I have to somehow fix something.
Yeah. And when you're in that trap, when you're believing that that's true, there's no room for you to make a choice that would actually be good for you. Because if I'm believing that I need my mother to be in a good mood in order for me to enjoy Christmas dinner, it just is like the no-win situation, right? Like I'm tugging on her to be something she's not. And so if she's feeling that I need her to be something she's not, which feels unloving and shamey and judgy and aggressive and pushy. And then I'm also deciding that I have no agency. It all relies on her. She has to get it together, or my dad has to get together, or my brother and my mom need to get along, or whatever, in order for me to feel okay. So it completely removes any of my own agency from the situation. And once you've done that, in many ways, it's actually this kind of convenient trick that the ego does to convince you that you don't have agency, so that you just get stuck in the straitjacket and you're like, womp womp, like that's that's life.
Yeah, you get to be helpless,
right?
Which has a weird, good feeling associated with it's not your fault.
Yeah, you're the good one.
Like you're not to blame. Like you can't help it.
Yeah,
but it feels actually super shitty, and we don't actually like it, but we kind of
we kind of crave it. And yes, we talked about it in Selfless Love a little bit, so it's on the radar a little bit, and when we can unhook from that, the idea that I need everything out there to look a certain way in order for me to have the feeling I want to have, then you can start making different kinds of decisions. Like, let's say that it's the first one I started with, Christmas dinner, your mother's in a terrible mood, and the thought comes, I need her to be in a happy mood too. And we wouldn't even be aware of this thought, right? Like we just go straight into action mode, but I need her to be happy in order for me to enjoy Christmas dinner. And there's a million tiny stories that come hooked into that. Christmas is supposed to look a certain way. People are supposed to behave a certain way. This time of year is a certain kind of import. If that doesn't happen, it means that I am going to But when you can start just like pulling away some of those veils and seeing that those stories are not true, then what you're left with is your agency. It is your opportunity. And it's like, gosh, well, and this is where I feel like people start to sometimes feel like it's taboo. Like, you're allowed to decide that you don't want to sit at a dinner table with someone who, in this example, is miserable. Like, you're allowed to make that choice in a loving way. Just like, let's say it's truly miserable, right? And you're like, I love you so much. And gee, I'll help you put the dishes in the dishwasher and then I'm heading right home. Or whatever you need to do to kind of give yourself more space. Or maybe it means that suddenly you discover this whole wellspring of ability to enjoy the dinner because you're just enjoying the dinner and you're not worried about what's up with everyone else. And I swear to you, once you get to that place where you're just in yourself and you're letting other people's business be their business, the energy changes. Mm-hmm. So this is the thing about it. When you stop trying to fix or manipulate out there, the funny thing about it is that ironically, it actually changes. Not in this perfect Snow White birds alighting on your arms kind of way, but suddenly there's a movement that's different. And when I do this thing, like I was saying with my mother, where I can just suddenly regard her in the present moment in a more spacious way, where I'm not telling myself all the stories about who she is or what she should be or what she should be saying or thinking or feeling. And I'm literally just see her. It's like I zoom out kind of, and like I zoom out and also ground down into myself and regard her. It's the funniest thing. Suddenly our conversation becomes something it never could have been before. Suddenly she's not just playing her tape and I'm not just playing my tape. And we actually get this moment of like, it's almost uncanny. Like sometimes I'll do it. Let's say she's talking about politics, which is a subject we avoid the most. It's also the subject she wants to talk about the most. And I'll just do this thing where I kind of get present and really, really lovingly regard her without pushing at her. I'm in myself. And suddenly she'll start telling me about what painting she's most excited about that she's making, or this great book she just read. And then we get this chance to connect in this new way. So it's uncanny. I know you've found that too.
Yeah. In a way, it's like we have to let things be unpredictable.
Yeah.
If we expect things to be a certain way, which we do when it comes to family, because it's like 40 years tells me it will be like this. And then we prepare for that. And that means a certain thing. And, when I was in counseling, when I was in psychotherapy, when I was living in San Francisco, and I think I told the story, but and I was in school and I'm working on some of the issues I had up with my mother. And, it was things like she guilts me and she needs too much and all of these different things, which like, it does not matter at all that my mom has very human needs to be close with her daughter. What mattered is that I was codependently wired. So her very human need brought out a guilt response in me that I was then blaming her for, right? Even though it's my baggage. So once I realized that she's entitled to be human and to have wants and to have needs, and I'm entitled not to meet them, which I had not realized earlier, things softened. And when things softened towards her, like you're describing with your mother, I didn't expect her to change. It wasn't for her. That's always the caveat.
Yeah,
we're not
very
trying
important.
to expect people to change.
That's the
we're
part
not doing
you have
it for
to
that.
Sacrifice. Yeah.
Always checking in with our motivation and inspiration. But the motivation was for me to be free of the response and the reaction, right? And then lo and behold, they did. And because we're all connected, what I realized was I was walking up to her defended.
Yeah.
Bristly. Like expecting her to annoy me, expecting her to ask for something I didn't want to give, expecting her to guilt me. I was really seeing her through the eyes of my past and the ways that I wasn't getting met. And it's interesting how narcissistic we can be like that, right? It's like, it's not that we're arrogant. It's not that we don't give a shit about humans. It's that kind of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche version of just so self-referencing.
Yeah. That
everything's like me, and what she's doing to me and what she wasn't giving. And then as soon as I released and I can soften and realize I can't save them. In fact, I don't have to save them. In fact, it's a lot of fucking hubris to think it's my job as someone 30 years her, junior to save her. Like she's done her life. And also, by the way, she's God. So, I mean, what kind of shit is this?
Because
right?
we all are. Yeah.
Because we all are. And like, I wasn't mad at myself for it. It was just this opening of my mind that was laughing. Like, you're holding all this responsibility. And it's ruining your relationship with your mother. You're finding her very annoying because of the responsibility you decided to hold. And B, you're completely missing the truth, which is this is her ride and she's God and she gets choice. And that's what we get in this world. And like, let her have it. Right.
Yeah.
And she shifted. And over the years, that's evolved more and more and more and more. I mean, with this mold illness, my mom's been like remarkable, like whatever you need to get better. I mean, my parents last time when I was moving from New York to San Francisco and they didn't want me to, my mom was like, what could I bribe you with? Like, what could I do to make you stay? It was crazy, very Italian. This time I'm moving from Miami to Austin, I think. And my mom's like, as long as you're getting better. And I'm like, who the fuck is this person on the phone with me? But I was prepared to be surprised by her. I am always now way more prepared to be surprised by people. And I think that's hard with our family members. There's so many pain bodies and so many unmet needs that we just imagine that if only they got met, that would be the answer. We don't realize that that's not at all relevant.
Yeah.
So yes, like you were saying, Brooke, like when you can shift, if you can.
Yeah. And this is a tiny baby steps thing. Like it's just 2 seconds notice that you're running a story about how it's going to go. Boom. Big deal. Like that's a big deal.
Right. Maybe you got an hour out of it where you enjoyed the person, or maybe you got 2 minutes, or maybe you got a whole holiday and then you didn't get the next one, or you didn't get the next phone call, but this is kind of just the process. And how can you bring a lot of compassion to this human journey? Because we've all been exposed to intergenerational trauma. Most people in this world are unskillful, not kind, not mirroring, hurt, afraid. And that gets passed down, right? In our genetics, in our neurobiological wiring. So we can have compassion for the whole human equation, us, them, everybody, without having to forego our needs. So I think let's talk about that. Like you mentioned, moving away, you can do that. Let's talk about choice.
Yeah.
But we don't have to forego our needs. Like Maharaji said, you can keep them in your heart, but you don't have to keep them in your life.
Yeah.
Like we do have choice, but we can bring a lot of compassion to ourselves and to them as we, recognize our own humanity and these pain bodies that are just a part of the equation.
Yeah, I was talking this is just making me think, like as an example of how often we tell ourselves that we don't get to do what's okay for us and what's a yes for us. I was talking with a woman about her Thanksgiving. It is that time of year, right, where we're all talking about it. And she had this very passive aggressive stepmom who she was hosting, and her dad. And so it was, big dinner, again, Italian, right? So you know what that means in terms of hospitality. So much cooking, so many courses, so many dishes,
skills,
so much, right? It all has to be just right. Yeah. And so this woman kept doing really passive aggressive stuff around dishes, where she would just finish for an hour washing everyone's dishes. And then she'd be like, oh, oops. Oh, I forgot I had a coffee mug and these 3 other plates, So she would feel like she was totally chained to the sink the whole time. And it's so funny how often we just tell the shitty story about that person. That passive aggressive bitch is doing this on purpose to make sure I don't get any social time with my dad and my family and blah, blah. And then we just act out the role that they've prescribed for us and that we've prescribed for us. It's very simple to say like, oh, okay, I just finished washing dishes for an hour. I'll let you take care of these. Like, it's okay to say these. There are a million tiny moments where you could just say what's true for you. I am so tired. I'm going to go lay down on the couch and drink some hot chocolate with everyone. It's okay. It's really okay. And what's really fascinating to watch and what's a great opportunity about the holidays is you get to notice the stories you tell yourself about yourself and not just about everyone else. That you need to put up with X, or you need to do Y, or they'll never forgive you, or you need to invite so-and-so because how could you ever not invite your own brother or whoever, You're actually allowed to make choices that are good for you and healthy for you. Totally allowed.
Yeah, maybe the first step is recognizing you have choice. We've talked about kind of that healing arc and, prior to recognizing you have choice, you feel the victim of your circumstances. Like things are just happening to me. There's no way out of them. People are pushing my buttons. I can't help that. We have that experience. As we start to like heal and evolve, we recognize, oh my God, I have choice. I have choice about how I think. I have choice about how I feel. I have choice about what I do. Now, there's some categories of life where that may seem shockingly obvious. Like I can choose my career, or I can choose how I let my boss treats me. And then perhaps when it comes to your family, it becomes murkier because of your pain bodies and your belief systems. So maybe at first you can just have this leap of faith moment where you're listening to us and you're like, okay, choice exists. Now, part 2 is if I don't choose, what's up, right? What's underneath that? In other words, there are going to be moments, I am telling you from personal experience only, where you have choice and you don't choose better. You still choose to do that same holiday that makes you crazy, or to be around that same friend that drains you every day because you just have to. And then that gives you the opportunity to see where the Velcro is, to kind of see where the pain bodies are. So for example, I think I talked about it when I was talking about this mold illness and like moving from Miami, but I probably should have left weeks ago. What this environment really is not good on my health. But it was my family, and it was my belief systems around family and my husband and making people happy that kept me here. Now, Kieran, as my mentor, was fighting energetically with me tooth and nail to be like, you've got to just go, like, just go. And I wouldn't do it. I saw I wouldn't do it. She saw I wouldn't do it. There was no delusion present whatsoever. It was just, no, this pain body was not ready to let go. Mm-hmm. It was still in contraction. There was no ripeness. And then she offered me what, I think was the most helpful advice. And it's kind of changed everything for me. And I hope it can change things for all of you. But she said, great. Okay, you're not going to shift this. It's not ripe. So just be aware.
Yeah.
Just be aware of it as it's happening, and I was. And then that changed things. Like, oh, this is so incredible. I know we have choice. I know that when I think people are going to reject me or abandon me, or that I'm responsible for someone's happiness, I know that's not true cognitively, right? Even though I have these unconscious belief systems that cling to that level of truth, I know it. And I'm not breaking out of it. I'm going to still play this out a little bit. And that's okay. And if I can change it, and if you can, and it's ripe, do. Because that's why choice exists. And what's right for you is right for everyone. That's interconnectivity. And if you can't, observe. Because in the awareness, especially when you can have that warm, gentle touch of like, okay, this is just what it is. This is how we work as humans. It then shifted and it softened. And I had to go through a little more because that was the path I took. But there wasn't another path for me. Yeah. As far as my system was concerned, this was what it could do. And it's huge.
It is so
made
powerful.
That shift is huge.
Yep. We don't need to pile drive through everything all at once, And Kieran's words to me lately, she keeps saying, we have all of eternity to shift this stuff. We don't need to rush. You're laughing because you know exactly why she would say that to me. But it's true. It's relieving. It's like, oh, I don't need to eradicate all of my egoic belief structures in one handy stroke of a magic wand. That doesn't need to happen.
And maybe we can add that there were certain phases in my own healing journey, my own awareness journey, where I couldn't be around my father. There were certain phases where he was really agitating to me, mm-hmm. where I couldn't be around my mother, or I couldn't be around a certain friend, or whatever the case may be. And then there's other phases where that's fine. Where it totally is fine. Don't get so rigid and afraid that one thing means everything.
And this forever.
Forever. That's again trying to create predictability. And what that does is it scares us, because we're if I let myself feel these feelings, or I say no to this holiday, or I say no to the dishes, or I take a pass, if I can't be around this person for now, it feels like I've lost this relationship, or I'm giving up on someone, or it'll go too far. And really, that's not the case. Yes, there are other people involved, and we can't speak for them. But the general statement in terms of reality is everything comes in phases, everything ebbs and flows. And so don't predict tomorrow based on how you feel today. That's the delicious yes, right? So in this present moment, what's best for you to do? Mm-hmm. Is it to fly in on Christmas Eve and leave on the 26th? It may not always be like that, but right now that's what's right. Mm-hmm. Is it to take a hall pass? Maybe that's right. And if we can all trust life and trust a little bit, which is hard, that's what belief systems are, the opposite of trust. But if we can work with that principle of trusting life, then we can start to actually moment by moment shape how we're connecting with these wonderful tribes of ours.
I love it. Happy holidays, everyone. Let us know how it goes as you toy around with these things.
We're such Debbie Downers all the time.
No, we're not. There was good stuff in this one.
It's going to be fun. Enjoy. It's precious. Thanks for listening to the show. The show notes, including any resources we mentioned, live at blissandgrit.com. If you go to the website and scroll down, you'll see each episode's separate post, and the resources are in there. You can also come play with us on the social media channel of your choice, and Instagram and Facebook are really where we're most available and where the conversation's happening. We're Bliss and Grit at both of those spots. If you want to support the show, we love that, and you can write us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or on our Facebook page. We also have a new subscribe form on the website, which is blissandgrit.com, and you can sign up there if you want to stay in touch with the goodies we have coming up for this community. Your reviews, they're beautiful for us to read, so that's one. It also helps other people find the show, which is much appreciated. But if technology isn't your thing and you're loving the show, well, then just tell your friends you think it may resonate with. Huge bit of gratitude to all of you who have already written reviews like Aw H. Seuss, Christy Poo 13, Liminal Lover, Sports Dude, Becca Di Liberto, and so many more. And I just want to read one of them from D.M. Ma, who said, "Loving the conversation between Vanessa and Brooke and all that they share. They offer thoughtful reflection and an authentic response grounded in real experience, scholarship, and practice. The stuff that gets into the heart, mind, and works into the mix of things." Thanks so much, DM Ma, and thanks to all of you who've reviewed, and a big bit of gratitude and a big happy holiday wish to all of you listening in. May all know joy, peace, and love.